hadallo
beds, and including in hospices and other community beds and the independent sector. To drive further progress and support regional and local systems, I've also established a new national task force last month to help deliver best practice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his answer. Many people would like to leave hospital when their treatment is completed, but they're not quite well enough to cope alone at home. And that's obviously frustrating for them because they want their independence, creates problems for hospitals, which need the beds, and it costs the taxpayer unnecessary money. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that the development of a strategy to provide intermediate care to support discharge would help alleviate pressure on both the NHS and the social care sector?
I do agree with my honourable friend, Mr. Speaker, and that is why, as part of our continued response to the COVID-19 pandemic, on the 2nd of December last year, the NHS England, they asked local systems to consider ways to increase patient flow out of acute hospital settings, and this has included surge capacity in care homes, identifying unused hospice capacity, and repurposing, in some cases, hotel accommodation where appropriate. NHS England is reporting to me on this regularly, and it is something that we will very closely monitor progress on.
Barbara Keeley.
The government's own impact assessment of discharge to assess in the Health and Social Care Bill, which was published almost 2 months after it was voted on, expects unpaid carers to have to give up working hours and bear the financial burdens of the discharge to assess policy. In light of this assessment, will the government provide greater support to unpaid carers, or will it actually reconsider this policy?
Mr. Speaker, throughout the pandemic especially, we have been providing more and more support, quite rightly, to the care sector across the sector, including those whether it's domiciliary care, in care homes and unpaid carers. We've made some £3.3 billion of extra funding and support available since March 2020.
Kettering General Hospital is a 500-bed medium general hospital, and I'm afraid there are too many, mainly elderly people, who've completed their medical treatment, but they still await discharge back into the community in a safe way. Will the Secretary of State for Health ensure that a national task force is sent to Northamptonshire to help us deal with this issue?
My honourable friend is right to raise this. It is an issue of increasing concern, especially as we've seen hospitalisations rise because of the Omicron wave. And I believe that the National Task Force is already looking at Northamptonshire, and if they are not, I will certainly make sure that.
We now come and welcome Shadow Minister Karen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Around 10,000 medically fit people currently in hospital when they should be at home with their families or in a supported setting. It is a tragedy for them and marks shame on this government. Short-term cash, task forces or threatening legal action are not solutions. Social care support is a lifeline, not a luxury. So will the government now work with us, cross-party, in line with the Joint Select Committee's report of 2018, to bring forward immediate change and offer hope and respite to those receiving and giving social care?
Hear, hear. Secretary of State.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, may I welcome the honourable lady to her new position and wish her all the very best. And she would have heard in her previous answer that, of course, social care, those who provide social care, is such a vital act and such a vital service throughout our country, are receiving record amounts of support, £3.3 billion of extra financing since March 2020. And of course, I'd be more than happy to work with her and her colleagues and see if there's more that we can do together.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I would like to take this question together with number 15. We have developed a globally recognised programme that combines boosters, testing and antivirals to protect the vulnerable and to reduce hospital admissions. Our Get Boosted Now campaign led to a huge increase in vaccination rates, and we have successfully procured the highest number of antivirals per head in Europe. We are also employing the use of remote monitoring technology to enable more patients to get the care that they need at home rather than having to be admitted into hospital.
Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before Omicron arrived, there had been over 10 million positive cases in this country of COVID-19, of which 14 in every 1,000 appeared to have been fatal. Since Omicron arrived, there have been a further 5 million cases, and it does look as though the fatality rate is about 10 times lower from these cases. Can the Secretary of State tell the House how important the Get Boosted Now programme has been in reducing hospitalisations and fatalities?
Yes, of course, Mr. Speaker. The officials within my department have carried out a wealth of analysis on case fatality rates in the vaccinated and unvaccinated populations. And recent data has shown that COVID-19 case fatality rates is for the over 80s is likely to be more than 5 times greater in those that are unvaccinated versus those that have had at least 2 doses. My honourable friend may be interested to know, when I recently visited the ICU unit that was dealing with COVID patients in King's College, the consultant in charge told me that he estimated around 70% of his patients on that day were completely unvaccinated. And it's absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker, as we've seen, especially in the last few weeks, that vaccinations save lives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a 90-year-old constituent whose wife of 65 years has been prevented going to see his 89-year-old wife, and it took my intervention after 20 days of him being prevented from seeing her, from him being able to get into the hospital, neither of whom have COVID. Could my right honourable friend please instruct health trusts that as we reduce our COVID incidents in hospitals, that family members must be allowed to go and see their family members in hospital?
Mr. Speaker, I am very sorry to hear about what happened to my honourable friend's constituent. It cannot be right that people are unable to visit their loved ones whilst they are in hospital, and it should not require the intervention of a Member of Parliament to do so. So allowing such visits should be an absolute priority in every trust, and I've recently raised this issue with the Chief Executive of the NHS, and she has assured me that this message will be sent loud and clear to all NHS trusts.
Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Too many women with endometriosis are being forced to go to A&E or seek hospital admissions for their treatment. This is partly because they're waiting on average 7.5 years for a diagnosis. So I wonder to the Secretary of State what he can do to improve the knowledge and awareness of endometriosis right across all different aspects of the NHS.
Yeah. The Honourable Lady, Mr. Speaker, is absolutely right to raise the importance of endometriosis, and she will know, hopefully, that in the Women's Health Strategy that this is something that will be a very important focus, and we will set out, within that strategy, we've set out how we can work together to do much more.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that the number of COVID admissions has led to a number of people having their routine hospital treatment cancelled. And last week there was an announcement that it had reached a record-breaking 6 million people. Could I ask the Secretary of State, Mr. Speaker, when the government might make a statement about hitting this figure and when set out a plan to tackle it?
In 1960, Somaliland emerged independent from the British Empire after many years as the British Somaliland Protectorate. And for 5 days it was independent before it took the step to merge with what was then the trust territories of Italian Somaliland, historic Italian Somaliland, to form a union. Both nations entered that union with optimism, with a sense and a view of creating a pan-Somalia, of where all Somalis would be able to come together. And actually the hope was for so many of those in Somaliland that actually this would be a union of equals. Sadly, over the following 30 years, those hopes and those aspirations of what might have been were not fulfilled. And indeed, as the years progressed, the situation got worse with military dictatorships. And instead of there being a tragic situation of people being discriminated against from the north of Somalia in historic British Somaliland, actually what started to emerge was attacks upon civilians. There was mass killings where tens of thousands of Somalilanders were killed. Civilians were killed. It was one of the few conflicts where fighter jets took off from cities in the area in order to bomb the cities that they'd taken off from. indiscriminately killing thousands of civilians. Nomadic tribes. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
And for securing this very important debate. My constituency has a very large Somaliland population of those from Somaliland whose families suffered in, as he's described, in that conflict. What we've seen is last year Somaliland celebrated 30 years of the Declaration of Independence. And they've built up their own independent government, own currency and democratic elections. They've shown the capability to establish a state. Isn't it time, in his view, that the UK government formally recognise their right to self-determination and recognise their need to be an independent state?
The Honourable Lady raises a very important point, and this is the key point and reason for this debate, to actually discuss about the fact that Somaliland has developed so much. Because in those years of conflict, where so many Somalilanders were not just in the threat of their lives, but so many hundreds of thousands were displaced, both internally within Somaliland, but also externally. That dream and that vision of actually creating their own homeland once again, re-establishing those old territorial borders, burnt bright, and that is what they actually were able to achieve in 1991. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Giving way and draw attention to my interests as one of the vice chairs of the all-party group on Somaliland, and been a pleasure to work with the honourable gentleman on these issues. Would he also pay tribute to my predecessor, Alan Michael, and indeed many members of the Somalilander community in Cardiff and across the UK for exposing those atrocities back at the time, including in this House and elsewhere, and explaining what had gone on to the world, and commending them on what they did at that time.
I'd like to pay tribute to the honourable member's predecessor and, of course, so many people who live within his constituency. And, of course, in his constituency is a very established Somaliland community that's been there far longer than probably either he or myself have been on this earth. And so this country has deep, deep links with Somaliland that goes actually not just back many decades, but goes back a century and more, with many Somalilanders calling Britain very much their home, as well as Somaliland itself. I'd give way to my honourable friend.
First of all, I'm delighted that my honourable friend from South Staffordshire has secured this important debate. Many of us who've been supporting Somaliland as an independent state very much welcome the fact that he's here. On that very point, he will know, no doubt, that many of Her Majesty's naval ships for 100 or more years have had Lashkars from Somaliland, Stokers and others who have built the first mosques in this country. Would he not agree with me that recognising the Somalilanders here in the UK is about also recognising our own past and our own future together as investors in a new Africa and demonstrators that independent states that govern themselves well in democracies can really succeed, and we can partner with them?
My honourable friend, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, is absolutely right. By taking the brave step to recognise Somaliland, we're actually not just opening up opportunities for Somaliland itself. We're actually opening up opportunities for British investors, British business to go there and work, very much creating the gateway to the whole of the Horn of Africa. I will give way to my right honourable friend and then my right honourable friend.
I'm very grateful indeed to my right honourable friend who has brought this most important subject to the floor of the House. Can I tell him that I have visited Hargeisa when I was Secretary of State for International Development, and indeed we spent quite a lot of time on exactly the issues he and the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee have just raised. There is an enormous degree of normalcy there. The democratic structures, when they have elections, have held in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. There is proper governance. I've travelled on a bus in Hargeisa that was a result of British investment. And the case he's making about Somaliland becoming an independent state is one which the Foreign Office normally take the view that they don't want to lead it, but they would support it. But is he aware that the African Union is at least passively acquiescent in that view, if not actively supportive?
Well, on both areas that my right honourable friend raises, he's absolutely right. You know, you fly into Hargeisa Airport, it is a safe place in order to be able to visit. You can get a bus to the centre of Hargeisa, as my right honourable friend did. And when I visited, I must confess I didn't get a bus, but I will endeavour to do so next time I do visit. And he's equally right. You know, this is an opportunity for Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office so often want to be led on these issues. There is a moment sometimes for Britain to lead as against to be led. I give way to my right honourable friend, the member for Elmet first.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. So I'm most grateful to my right honourable friend. And I think my right honourable friend makes an important point about leading the world, because we have seen throughout the world that where Western nations don't get involved, China does. And when we've had many discussions in this House recently about the influence of China. So does my right honourable friend agree with me, when you look at the development taking place in Somaliland, that actually there are strategic interests in our country and in Western countries to not just see what happens, but to actually take an active leading role and not allow that vacuum to be filled by those who perhaps we have difficulties with?
My right honourable friend is so correct in the point as he makes. If you just look to the north of Somaliland and Djibouti, and you see the Chinese investment that is going into Djibouti, and the fact that actually where there is a vacuum, others do step in. And by showing the leadership that this country can show, by recognising Somaliland, actually it shows to those Somalilanders, it shows to the government of Somaliland, the value that we put on their friendship and their partnership. I give way to my right honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. I commend him for this debate, and I'm honoured to represent a Somaliland community in Swindon. Just building on the points made by right honourable members about the strategic importance of Somaliland, particularly its proximity to international shipping lanes. And we all know from British leadership under our good friend the noble Lord Haig, this country led the way in dealing with the issues of piracy emanating from the Horn of Africa. Is it not now another opportunity for Britain to show leadership and to recognise stable government in a region that is in pitifully short supply of such quality?
My right honourable friend is absolutely accurate in his assessment, and already, as we, even though we're not in a position where we've recognised Somaliland, we already have that level of cooperation with the Somalilanders. Visiting Somaliland when I was Defence Secretary, I saw firsthand the cooperation that British forces were already having with Somaliland in terms of supporting them in protecting their coastal waters, but also by protecting their coastal waters, keeping them safe for the international community. I give way to the honourable lady.
Thank the honourable member for giving way and thank him for securing this very important debate, and commend the government for the support it's been providing the administration of Somaliland. Liverpool Riverside has a very long established Somali community and Somalilanders, and I'd like to know whether the honourable member will join me in calling for the UK government to support a binding referendum within 2 years to allow Somalilanders to express their democratic will guaranteed by the international community. Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not sure if you're an expert on Somaliland affairs, but it is the opportunity for you to brush up on them this afternoon. But the honourable lady makes an important point. But there's already been a referendum in Somaliland that has been absolutely clear as to what the wishes of the Somaliland people are, and that they want to see recognition, that they want to be independent, to have that independent state. But I'm sure if that is what is a hurdle that is required in order to be able to establish international recognition for Somaliland, that is something that the Somaliland government may wish to look at. I give way to the honourable gentleman, and then I will go to...
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman, and he has been extremely fortunate not only in the House enabling him to have a lot of time this evening to debate this important topic, but of course in the number of people who are supporting him here and supporting the cause of Somaliland. And of course my own community in Wembley has a huge Somaliland community of expatriates, and one of the points that they've made to me is that they believe, and I would ask if he agrees